The winter of 1873 came early to the Nebraska Territory, bringing with it a fury that even the old-timers hadn't seen in decades. The sky hung low and gray, pregnant with snow that fell in thick, suffocating sheets across the endless prairie. Wind howled through the valleys like the screams of the damned, cutting through wool and leather as if they were paper. Emma Hartley stood at the frost-covered window of her cabin, watching the storm approach with growing dread. Her breath fogged the glass as she pressed her palm against it, feeling the bitter cold seep through. The small wooden structure groaned under the assault of the wind, and she could see gaps in the chinking between logs where the cold air whistled through. At 23, she was already a widow, her husband Thomas taken by fever just 8 months prior, leaving her alone with their 4-year-old son, Samuel. The boy sat near the dying embers of their fire, playing with wooden blocks Thomas had carved last Christmas. His innocent laughter pierced Emma's heart. He was too young to understand their desperate situation. Their food stores were nearly depleted, reduced to a handful of cornmeal, some dried beans, and a few strips of jerky. The woodpile outside was buried under 6 feet of snow from the last storm, and what little they had inside would last perhaps another day, maybe 2 if she rationed it carefully. Emma pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and moved to stoke the fire. Each piece of wood she added felt like a countdown to their doom. The nearest neighbor, the Millers, lived 5 miles east, but in this weather, it might as well have been 50. The town of Willow Creek lay 12 miles north, but the thought of attempting that journey with Samuel in these conditions made her stomach clench with fear. She had already burned most of their furniture for warmth. Thomas's chair, the small table where they used to share meals, even their bed frame. All that remained were 2 straw mattresses on the floor and the rocking chair where she nursed Samuel as a baby. That chair would be next, she knew, but she couldn't bring herself to destroy it yet. It held too many memories. The storm struck with full force as darkness fell. The cabin shuddered and creaked, snow piling against the door until Emma had to push hard just to open it enough to bring in the last few pieces of split wood. Ice crystals stung her face like tiny needles, and the cold was so intense it made her lungs ache with each breath. By the time she managed to close the door again, snow had blown in, creating small drifts on the floor. That night, she held Samuel close under their 2 thin blankets and the quilt her mother had made for her wedding. The boy shivered against her, his small body generating precious little heat. Emma stared at the ceiling, listening to the storm rage outside, and made a decision that would have horrified her just months ago. Come morning, if the storm showed any sign of breaking, she would take Samuel and attempt to find help. To stay meant certain death. Dawn came without sun, just a gradual lightening of the darkness outside. The storm had lessened, but not stopped, snow still falling steadily. Emma fed Samuel the last of their cornmeal porridge, saving none for herself. She wrapped him in every piece of clothing she could find: 2 shirts, a coat that had been his father's cut down to size, mittens she had knitted from unraveled wool, and boots stuffed with cloth to make them fit better. "Where are we going, Mama?" Samuel asked, his blue eyes, so like his father's, looking up at her trustingly. "On an adventure," Emma said, forcing a smile. "We're going to find some nice people who might share their fire with us." She dressed herself in Thomas's old work clothes under her dress, adding layers until movement became difficult. The decision to leave was madness. She knew. But staying was death. At least this way. There was a chance, however slim. They hadn't gone a mile before Emma realized her mistake. The snow was deeper than she had thought, in some places reaching her thighs. She carried Samuel, but progress was agonizingly slow. The wind cut through their layers of clothing as if they wore nothing at all. Her feet went numb first, then her fingers, even through the mittens. Samuel had stopped talking, his face buried against her neck, and she could feel him shivering violently. Panic began to rise in her throat. They couldn't go back. She wasn't even sure she could find the cabin now in the whiteout conditions. Forward was the only option, but she had no idea if she was still heading north toward town or if she had become turned around in the storm. It was then, through the swirling snow, that she saw it. A thin column of smoke rising from what looked like a sheltered area among some rocks. Her heart leaped with hope and terror in equal measure. Fire meant people, but what kind of people? The territory was dangerous, filled with outlaws, deserters from both sides of the recent war, and Indians. But Samuel's weight in her arms made the decision for her. His shivering had stopped, which terrified her more than the storm. She stumbled toward the smoke, calling on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. The shelter was a natural cave in the rocks, its entrance partially shielded from the wind. As she drew closer, she saw a figure sitting by a small fire, a man, his back to her, long black hair falling past his shoulders. Her steps faltered when she saw the horse tethered nearby, an Indian pony with distinctive markings. The man's clothing, what she could see of it, was a mixture of buckskin and cloth, decorated with beadwork. A Comanche warrior. Everything she had been taught, every story she had heard about Indian raids and massacres, screamed at her to run. But Samuel lay still and cold in her arms. And she knew with terrible certainty that without warmth and shelter, her son would die within the hour. She must have made a sound, or perhaps the horse alerted him, because the warrior turned. His face was younger than she had expected, perhaps 30 winters, with sharp cheekbones and dark eyes that assessed her with startling intelligence. His hand moved to the knife at his belt, but didn't draw it. Emma stood frozen, Samuel's weight growing heavier in her arms with each passing second. The warrior's eyes moved from her face to the bundle she carried, and something in his expression shifted slightly. He made no move toward her, neither welcoming nor threatening, simply waiting. Desperation gave her courage. She took a step forward, then another. "Please," she said, her voice cracked and weak. "My son." The warrior's eyes narrowed slightly, but he remained silent. Emma's legs trembled, threatening to give out. She had one card to play, one thing she could offer. The thought made her sick, but Samuel's life hung in the balance. She swallowed hard, lowering her eyes. I will." The words stuck in her throat like broken glass. She forced herself to meet his gaze again. "You can have me. Do what you want with me. Just, please, save my son. He's dying." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the howling wind outside the shelter. The warrior's expression remained unreadable as he studied her, taking in her frost-covered clothes, her desperate eyes, the still form of the child in her arms. Finally, he spoke, his English accented but clear. "You owe me nothing." The warrior rose to his feet in one fluid motion, and Emma instinctively took a step back, clutching Samuel tighter. But the man simply gestured toward the fire with an open palm, then moved to his pack near the cave wall. He pulled out a thick buffalo robe and spread it near the flames, far enough to be safe but close enough to feel the heat. "Bring the boy," he said, his voice carrying a note of urgency that cut through Emma's paralysis. She stumbled forward, her frozen legs barely responding. As she knelt to lay Samuel on the buffalo robe, her strength finally gave out, and she nearly dropped him. The warrior was there instantly, his hands surprisingly gentle as he helped lower the child. Up close, Emma could see the intricate beadwork on his shirt, the careful craftsmanship that spoke of loving hands, perhaps a mother or wife. Samuel's lips were tinged blue, his small face too pale. The warrior checked the boy's breathing, then began removing the ice-crusted outer layers of clothing with practiced efficiency. Emma's maternal instincts overrode her fear, and she helped, her numb fingers fumbling with buttons and ties. "The cold has gone deep," the warrior said. Wrapping Samuel in the buffalo robe, he retrieved another blanket from his pack, a wool trade blanket, and added it to the covering. Then he turned his attention to Emma, who knelt shivering violently beside her son. "You too," he said, indicating her frozen clothing. "The boy needs his mother alive." Emma's face burned with shame, remembering her desperate offer just moments before. But the warrior had already turned away, busying himself with adding wood to the fire and adjusting the stones around it to reflect more heat. His movements were deliberate, respectful, giving her privacy. With trembling hands, she removed her ice-encrusted shawl and coat. The warrior handed her another blanket without looking at her directly, and she wrapped it around herself gratefully. Warmth began to seep into her bones, painful at first as feeling returned to her extremities. The warrior produced a small pot from his supplies and packed it with snow from near the cave entrance. He set it on the coals to melt, then retrieved a leather pouch from his pack. The smell of dried meat filled the shelter as he pulled out several strips of jerky and some kind of dried roots. "Buffalo," he said simply, offering her a piece, "and prairie turnip. Eat slow." Emma accepted the food with shaking hands. The jerky was tough but flavorful, different from the venison she was used to. She wanted to wolf it down but forced herself to chew slowly, knowing her empty stomach would rebel if she ate too quickly. Samuel stirred slightly, a small whimper escaping his lips. It was the most beautiful sound Emma had ever heard. It meant he was still alive. The warrior checked on him, feeling his forehead and adjusting the blankets. "He is strong," he said to Emma, "like his mother." Tears suddenly blurred Emma's vision. The kindness, so unexpected from someone she had been taught to fear, overwhelmed her. She turned her face away, ashamed of her weakness and her earlier assumption about what would be required of her. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the crackling fire and the storm's fury outside. Emma found herself stealing glances at the warrior as he tended the fire and prepared the hot water. His movements were economical, purposeful. Several scars marked his arms and hands, evidence of a hard life. A decorated tomahawk hung at his side along with a knife, and she could see the outline of more weapons among his gear. When the water was ready, he added something from another pouch, dried herbs that gave off a medicinal smell. He let it steep, then poured some into a small tin cup. "For the boy," he said, helping Emma prop Samuel up. "Make him drink, just small sips." Together they coaxed the liquid into Samuel. The boy's eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused but aware. "Mama?" he whispered. "I'm here, sweetheart," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're safe. We're both safe." After Samuel drank what he could, the warrior offered the cup to Emma. The tea was bitter but warming, spreading heat through her chest and limbs. She recognized the taste of willow bark. Her grandmother had used it for fever and pain. "Thank you," she said, meeting the warrior's eyes. I'm sorry for what I said before. What I offered, it was—" "You offered what you thought you had," he interrupted, his expression unreadable. "A mother protecting her child. There is no shame in this." Emma felt fresh tears threaten. "I don't even know your name." "I am called Grey Wolf by your people," he said. "My true name is—" He spoke something in his own language, musical and complex, but Grey Wolf is easier for white tongues. "I'm Emma Hartley," she said. "This is my son, Samuel." Grey Wolf nodded, then returned to his side of the fire. He pulled out a piece of leather and began working on it with an awl, giving her space while staying watchful. Emma recognized the courtesy. He was allowing her dignity while ensuring their safety. As the fire crackled and the storm continued outside, she found herself studying their unlikely savior. Everything she had been told about the Comanches spoke of savagery and cruelty. Yet here was a man who had shown them nothing but kindness. The contradiction troubled her, shaking foundations she had never thought to question. "Your people," she ventured carefully. "Are they near?" Grey Wolf's hand stilled for a moment. "No," he said simply. "I travel alone now." There was a weight to those words that discouraged further questions. Emma sensed loss there, perhaps as profound as her own. She thought of Thomas, of the dreams they'd shared that died with him, and wondered what griefs this man carried. Samuel stirred again, more strongly this time. His color was better, the blue tinge gone from his lips. When he opened his eyes fully and saw Grey Wolf, He showed no fear, only the curiosity natural to a child. "Are you an Indian?" he asked with 4-year-old directness. Emma's breath caught, but Grey Wolf's expression softened slightly. "Yes, small one. Comanche." "My papa told me stories," Samuel said, his voice still weak but interested. "He said Indians ride horses fast as the wind." "This is true," Grey Wolf agreed solemnly. "My horse outside, he runs like the storm itself." Samuel's eyes widened with wonder. The simple exchange, free of the fear and hatred that poisoned adult interactions, made Emma's heart ache. When had children learned to fear and hate? When had she? The day wore on, the storm showing no signs of abating. Grey Wolf shared more of his supplies without being asked. Pemmican mixed with berries. More of the medicinal tea. Even a small piece of honey candy that made Samuel's face light up despite his weakness. Emma tried to protest, knowing he was depleting his own stores, but he waved away her concerns. "The storm will end," he said. "I know where to find more. You do not." As afternoon faded toward evening, Emma found herself telling him about Thomas's death, about the struggles of trying to maintain the homestead alone, about the dwindling supplies and the desperation that had driven her into the storm. Grey Wolf listened without interrupting, his dark eyes attentive. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "The land is hard," he finally said. "It does not care if you are white or Comanche, it tests all the same." "Is that why you're alone?" Emma asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. But Grey Wolf didn't seem offended. "My people were moved to the reservation. I could not go. The walls, the fences." He shook his head. "A warrior cannot live in a cage, even one with open sky above." Emma thought she understood. The loss of freedom, of a way of life. Wasn't that what she faced now too, in a different way? The frontier was changing, becoming something neither of them recognized. As night fell, the practical matters of sleeping arrangements arose. Grey Wolf solved it simply, moving his own bedroll to the far side of the fire and gesturing for Emma to rest beside Samuel. "Sleep," he said. "I will keep the fire." "All night," Emma protested. "You need rest too. I have slept in worse places," he said with what might have been the ghost of a smile. "And the boy may need tending in the night." Emma wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like lead weights. She lay down beside Samuel, drawing him close under the blankets. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was Grey Wolf's profile against the firelight, watchful and protective as any guardian spirit. In her dreams, the storm still raged, but she was warm and safe, and somewhere in the distance, horses ran like the wind across an endless prairie beneath a star-filled sky. The storm raged for 3 more days, trapping them in the cave like creatures in hibernation. By the second morning, Samuel had recovered enough to sit up and take notice of his surroundings with the boundless curiosity of childhood. Emma watched with mixed emotions as her son gravitated toward Grey Wolf, fascinated by everything about the Comanche warrior. "Can I touch it?" Samuel asked, pointing to the tomahawk at Grey Wolf's belt. Emma started to scold him, but Grey Wolf carefully removed the weapon and let the boy examine the handle, keeping the blade safely away from small fingers. The tomahawk was beautifully crafted, with intricate beadwork on the handle and feathers attached with sinew. "My grandfather made this," Grey Wolf explained, "when I became a warrior." "What's a warrior?" Samuel asked, running his fingers over the smooth wood. "A man who protects his people," Grey Wolf said simply. "Who hunts for them, fights for them when necessary. Like my papa did," Samuel said, and Emma's heart clenched. "He protected us from bad men once. They wanted to take our horse." Grey Wolf nodded solemnly. "Your father was a warrior then." The simple acknowledgement, the respect given to Thomas's memory by this unexpected source, moved Emma deeply. She busied herself with organizing their small space to hide the tears that threatened. As the days passed, she observed Grey Wolf's disciplined routine. Each morning, despite the cramped quarters, he performed a series of movements that seemed part exercise, part ritual. He maintained his weapons with careful attention, checked on his horse regularly despite the bitter cold. and always ensured the fire had sufficient wood before attending to any personal needs. His skills became more apparent with each passing hour. When Samuel grew restless with confinement, Grey Wolf produced a length of sinew and taught him to make simple knots, then more complex patterns. He carved a small horse from a piece of driftwood with swift, sure strokes of his knife, presenting it to the delighted boy. "You're very good with him," Emma said one evening as Samuel played with his new toy near the fire. "I had a son," Grey Wolf said quietly, "younger than this one." The past tense hung heavy between them. Emma didn't ask what had happened. The pain in his voice told her enough. They sat in companionable silence, both carrying ghosts. On the third night, Samuel developed a slight fever. Emma tried not to panic, but memories of Thomas's final illness made her hands shake as she felt her son's forehead. Grey Wolf immediately began preparing more of the medicinal tea, adding different herbs from his supply. "What is it?" Emma asked, watching him work. "Each plant has its purpose," he explained. "This one brings down fever. This strengthens the body. This helps breathing." He showed her each component before adding it to the pot. "My grandmother was a healer. She taught me some things." They took turns through the night, cooling Samuel's fever with snow-dampened cloths and coaxing tea into him. By dawn, the fever had broken, and the boy was sleeping peacefully. Emma found herself slumped against the cave wall, exhausted, with Grey Wolf's blanket somehow draped over her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered. "He is strong." Grey Wolf repeated his earlier assessment. Like his mother. Emma watched him tend the fire, noting the economical grace of his movements. Everything he did had purpose. Nothing wasted. She thought of the men in town, their casual violence and careless waste, their loud boasts in the saloon about Indian hunting. The contrast was stark. "Why did you help us?" she asked suddenly. "Your people and mine. We're enemies." Grey Wolf considered this for a long moment. "Are we?" he finally asked. "You, grieving your husband, trying to keep your child alive. How are you my enemy? The soldiers who burned our villages? Yes. The buffalo hunters who destroy the herds for sport? Yes. But you," he shook his head. "The storm makes no distinction between white and Comanche. Neither does hunger or cold or loss." His words echoed in the small space, profound in their simple truth. Emma felt something shift inside her. A wall she hadn't known was there, beginning to crumble. As the storm finally began to weaken on the fourth day, a new tension arose. Soon, travel would be possible again. Emma would need to return to her cabin, if it still stood, or make her way to town. The thought filled her with dread. Without Grey Wolf's supplies and knowledge, how would they survive the rest of the winter? She watched him teaching Samuel to braid leather, patient with the boy's clumsy fingers. Samuel had taken to following Grey Wolf around the small space like a shadow, mimicking his movements, absorbing his quiet strength. It twisted Emma's heart to see her son so naturally accepting what she had been taught to fear. "Grey Wolf," Samuel announced that evening. "When I grow up, I want to be a warrior like you and my papa." The Comanche warrior's expression softened. "Then you must learn to be strong here." He tapped his chest. "And here." He tapped his head. "A true warrior thinks before he acts. He provides before he fights. He protects those who cannot protect themselves, like you protected us," Samuel said matter-of-factly. Grey Wolf's eyes met Emma's across the fire. Something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. In that moment, she saw not a savage or an enemy, but a man who had shown them more kindness than many of her own people. That night, as Samuel slept between them by the fire, Emma found herself studying Grey Wolf's profile in the dying light. The strong jaw, the weathered lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into distant horizons, the way his hand rested protectively near his weapons, even in rest, always ready to defend. "What will you do when the storm ends?" she asked softly. He was quiet so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. Then, "Continue west. There are still places where a man can be free, for a little while longer, alone, as I have been." The sadness in those words made her chest tight. She thought of her empty cabin, The hostile town, the struggle that awaited her. "We're both alone," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "But for these days, we are not." The simple acknowledgement of their temporary companionship, the fleeting nature of this strange sanctuary, brought tears to her eyes. In a few days, she had found more genuine care and respect from this Comanche warrior than she had from her own community since Thomas's death. The irony was bitter. She dozed fitfully, waking several times to find Grey Wolf alert, feeding the fire, checking on Samuel, keeping watch as he had every night. His dedication humbled her, shamed her for the prejudices she had carried so thoughtlessly. Near dawn, she woke to find him standing at the cave entrance, studying the sky. The wind had died to a whisper, and stars were visible between breaking clouds. "Tomorrow," he said without turning. "The storm is finished." Emma joined him at the entrance, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. The world outside was transformed, buried under pristine white that sparkled in the starlight, beautiful and deadly, like so much of this land. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "You saved our lives." "No thanks needed," he replied. "You would do the same." "Would I?" Emma asked, honest in her uncertainty. "Before this, if a Comanche had come to my door. But now," he prompted gently. "Now I know better." She admitted. "You've shown us, more kindness than—" She couldn't finish, couldn't articulate the shame she felt for her people's hatred, for her own unexamined fears. Grey Wolf turned to look at her fully. In the pre-dawn light, she could see understanding in his dark eyes. "We learn," he said simply. "It is all anyone can do." As the first pale light of true dawn touched the snow-covered landscape, Emma felt the approaching end of their strange interlude like a weight on her chest. Soon, very soon, they would return to a world where a white woman and a Comanche warrior could not share a fire in peace, where the kindness between them would be seen as betrayal or worse. But for this moment, in this small cave that had become a haven, they were simply two people who had helped each other survive. And perhaps, Emma thought, that was the most revolutionary act of all. The morning sun revealed a world transformed by the blizzard. Drifts rose higher than a man's head in places, while wind-scoured patches showed brown earth beneath. Grey Wolf studied the landscape with practiced eyes, reading signs invisible to Emma. "Your cabin," he said, pointing southeast. 2, maybe 3 hours walking, if it stands." The uncertainty in his final words made Emma's stomach clench. What if the storm had destroyed their shelter? What would she and Samuel do then? As if reading her thoughts, Grey Wolf began preparing for their departure with methodical care. "We go together," he stated, not asking. "The snow hides dangers, crevices, weak ice on streams. I know what to watch for." Emma didn't argue. Pride seemed foolish when her son's life was at stake. She watched Grey Wolf pack his belongings efficiently, noting how he set aside extra supplies: dried meat, a small pouch of the medicinal herbs, even one of his blankets. "I can't take your provisions," she protested. "You can and will," he replied firmly. The boy needs strength for the journey. As they prepared to leave the cave that had been their salvation, Samuel clung to Grey Wolf's leg. "You're coming with us, aren't you?" Grey Wolf knelt to the boy's level. "I will see you safely home, small warrior." The journey tested Emma's endurance to its limits. Grey Wolf led, using a long stick to probe the snow depth, finding the safest path. He carried Samuel on his shoulders when the drifts grew too deep, the boy delighted by his high perch. Emma followed in their tracks, grateful for the trail Grey Wolf broke through the heavy snow. Halfway to the cabin, they encountered their first serious obstacle. What had been a gentle stream was now a torrent of snowmelt, the ice broken and churning with dangerous current. Grey Wolf studied the situation carefully, walking upstream and down, looking for a crossing. "There," he finally said, pointing to where a fallen tree spanned the water. Ice coated the log, making it treacherous. "I'll go first," he decided. "Test its strength." Emma watched heart in throat as he balanced across the slippery log with the grace of a cat. Once safe on the other side, he called back, "Send the boy to me." "I'm scared," Samuel whispered, peering at the rushing water below. "Remember what Grey Wolf taught you," Emma said, though her own fear threatened to choke her. "Warriors face their fear. Small steps." Grey Wolf called, "Look at me, not the water." Samuel took a deep breath and started across, arms outstretched for balance. Halfway there, his foot slipped on the ice. Emma's scream caught in her throat as the boy windmilled his arms, fighting for balance. In an instant, Grey Wolf was on the log, moving with impossible speed and sureness. He caught Samuel just as the boy began to fall, sweeping him to safety on the far bank. Emma's legs shook as she made her own crossing, Grey Wolf returning to the middle of the log to steady her. His hand was warm and solid, an anchor in her terror. When she reached the other side, she collapsed to her knees, pulling Samuel into a fierce embrace. "You saved him again," she said to Grey Wolf, her voice raw. "He saved himself," Grey Wolf corrected. "He didn't panic, a warrior's spirit." They encountered wolves an hour later. The pack emerged from a stand of cottonwoods, 5 gray shadows against the white landscape, drawn perhaps by hunger or curiosity. Emma instinctively pushed Samuel behind her, but Grey Wolf stepped forward calmly. He spoke to the wolves in his own language, his voice low and steady. His hand rested on his tomahawk, ready but not threatening. The lead wolf, a massive male with intelligent yellow eyes, seemed to consider Grey Wolf's words. After a long moment, it turned and melted back into the trees, the pack following. "What did you say to them?" Emma asked, amazed. "That we are not prey," Grey Wolf said simply. "That we walk with purpose and strength. Wolves respect strength." As they neared the cabin's location, Emma's anxiety grew. What would they find? The familiar landmarks were changed by snow, making navigation difficult. Then Grey Wolf pointed to a thin column of smoke, barely visible against the sky. "Someone is there," he said. Emma's relief at seeing the cabin still standing was short-lived. As they approached, she could see the damaged part of the roof had collapsed under the snow's weight. The door hung askew, and debris littered the yard. But smoke from the chimney meant someone had taken shelter there. Grey Wolf motioned for them to wait while he investigated. He moved silently despite the snow, circling the cabin like a hunting wolf. After a moment, he returned with a grim expression. "2 men," he reported. "They have taken shelter, burned your furniture for warmth." Emma's heart sank. She recognized this scenario. Desperate men, probably drifters or outlaws, who would claim salvage rights on an abandoned homestead. The law would likely side with them if they chose to stay. "What do we do?" she asked. Grey Wolf's expression was thoughtful. "You wait here. I will speak with them. They might be dangerous." "Yes," he agreed calmly. "They might be." Before she could protest further, he was walking openly toward the cabin. Emma held Samuel close, watching through the trees. She saw Grey Wolf approach the door, saw it open, saw the barrel of a rifle emerge. The conversation was too distant to hear, but she could read the body language. The men were aggressive, gestural. Grey Wolf remained still, unthreatening but somehow commanding. After several tense minutes, one man emerged fully rough-looking, unshaven, wearing Emma's late husband's coat. The sight of Thomas's coat on this stranger sparked unexpected rage in Emma. How dare they? How dare they invade her home? Steal from the dead? The discussion continued, then grew heated. The second man appeared, younger but equally rough. He made a threatening gesture with his rifle. In a motion so fast Emma barely saw it, Grey Wolf disarmed him, the rifle spinning away into the snow. His tomahawk appeared in his hand, not raised but present, a clear warning. The 2 men backed toward the cabin, but Grey Wolf said something that stopped them cold. He pointed to the trees where Emma and Samuel hid, then back to the men. His meaning was clear. This home had occupants who were returning. What followed was a brief but intense negotiation. Finally, Reluctantly, the men began gathering their few possessions. They emerged from the cabin, shooting dark looks toward the trees and darker ones at Grey Wolf, who watched impassively as they trudged away through the snow. Only when they were well distant did Grey Wolf signal Emma and Samuel to approach. The cabin was a disaster. Furniture burned, belongings scattered, food stores raided, but the structure still stood, and it could be repaired. "They'll come back," Emma said quietly. "Men like that always do." "Perhaps," Grey Wolf agreed. "But not today." He set about making the cabin habitable with the same quiet efficiency he'd shown in the cave. Using rope from his pack and branches cut from nearby trees, he created a temporary patch for the roof. He rehung the door, reinforcing it with additional wood. He even managed to clean and restart the chimney fire with wood from the pile the intruders had partially used. Samuel helped enthusiastically, following Grey Wolf's instructions, learning knots and basic repairs, watching them work together. Emma felt a bittersweet ache. This was what Samuel needed, a father's guidance, a man's teaching. That it came from a Comanche warrior instead of a white settler seemed increasingly irrelevant. As afternoon wore on, the cabin became livable again, if barely. Grey Wolf had salvaged what he could, even recovering some hidden preserves the intruders had missed. But Emma knew their situation remained precarious. Without supplies, without help from the town that had shunned her, survival through the remaining winter seemed impossible. She was contemplating this harsh reality when Grey Wolf spoke. "I must go." The words hit her like a physical blow, though she'd known they were coming. Samuel's reaction was immediate and vocal. "No!" he cried, running to grab Grey Wolf's hand. "You have to stay, please!" Grey Wolf knelt before the boy, his expression gentle. A warrior knows when to stay and when to go. "Small one, this is your home, your mother's home." "But it is not mine." "Then we'll come with you," Samuel declared with childish logic. Emma's heart broke at the hope in her son's voice. She met Grey Wolf's eyes over Samuel's head, seeing her own regret reflected there. For a wild moment, she wanted to agree, to leave this place of hardship and prejudice, to follow this man who had shown them more kindness than their own kind. But reality was harsh. A white woman traveling with a Comanche warrior would face dangers beyond imagining. And Grey Wolf was a man without a people, without a home. What life could they have? "Your mother is strong," Grey Wolf told Samuel. "She will take care of you, and you will take care of her, yes? Be the warrior your father would want you to be." Samuel was crying now, clinging to Grey Wolf's neck. The warrior held him for a long moment, then gently set him down and rose. He pulled something from his pack, the carved wooden horse he'd made for Samuel, and something else, a small leather pouch on a cord. "This is medicine," he told Emma quietly, placing the pouch in her hands. "For protection, for strength." He showed her the contents: herbs, a small stone with natural holes, a hawk feather. "Keep it safe." Emma's throat was too tight for words. She watched as he gathered his things, each movement taking him further from them. At the door, he paused. "The men who were here," he said, "they spoke of going to Willow Creek, to the saloon. They will drink, boast of finding an empty cabin. Others may come." He met her eyes. "Be ready." Then he was gone, walking into the afternoon sun that turned the snow to gold. Samuel ran to the window, pressing his small hands against the glass, watching until Grey Wolf's figure disappeared over a distant rise. Emma held her son as he cried, her own tears falling silently. In her hand, the medicine pouch seemed to pulse with warmth, a tangible reminder of the impossible kindness they'd been shown. Outside, the tracks in the snow told the story. A Comanche warrior had walked with them, protected them, saved them. Soon, wind and sun would erase those tracks. But what had passed between them, Emma knew, would mark her soul forever. Word of the Comanche warrior's presence spread through Willow Creek like wildfire in dry grass. By the time Emma made her first trip to town for supplies, 3 days after Grey Wolf's departure, the story had grown in the telling. The two drifters at the saloon had painted themselves as heroes who had faced down a savage and protected the Hartley widow's property. Emma kept her head high as she entered Morrison's general store. Samuel's small hand clutched tightly in hers. The usual chatter died as she walked in. Mrs. Morrison, who had once been cordial when Thomas was alive, now looked at her with barely disguised contempt. "Emma Hartley," the shopkeeper's wife said, her voice dripping false concern. "We heard you had some trouble at your place. The storm damaged the roof." Emma replied evenly, "Nothing that can't be repaired." "That's not the trouble I meant." "Mrs. Morrison said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Jake and Billy said there was an Indian. Said he was familiar with you." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Emma felt Samuel tense beside her, his innocent mind not understanding the ugly implications but sensing the hostility. "A Comanche warrior helped us during the storm," Emma said clearly, meeting the woman's eyes. "My son and I would have died without his kindness. He asked for nothing in return." The snort of disbelief came from behind her. Emma turned to see Howard Blackwood, the town's wealthiest rancher and a man who had made his interest in her known even before Thomas was cold in the ground. He leaned against the counter, his expensive coat and gold watch chain marking his status. "Indians don't help white women without wanting something," Blackwood said, his eyes traveling over Emma in a way that made her skin crawl. "Everyone knows what savages do to our women." "Then everyone knows wrong," Emma said firmly. "He showed us more Christian charity than—" She bit off the words, but the implication was clear. Blackwood's face darkened. He stepped closer, close enough that Emma could smell the tobacco and whiskey on his breath. "Careful, Mrs. Hartley. A widow with a reputation is a dangerous thing, especially one who consorts with savages." "Mama," Samuel piped up, his young voice cutting through the tension. "Is Mr. Blackwood talking about Grey Wolf? He's not savage. He saved me from drowning and taught me to make knots and—" "Hush, Samuel," Emma said quickly. But the damage was done. The store erupted in whispers. The boy had named the Indian, had spoken of him with affection. In the calculus of frontier prejudice, this was damning evidence. "Grey Wolf," Blackwood repeated, his voice mocking. "You let your boy get attached to a Comanche killer? What kind of mother does that?" "The kind who values her child's life above petty hatred." Emma snapped, her patience finally exhausted. The slap came so fast she didn't see it coming. Blackwood's hand cracked across her face, sending her stumbling. Samuel cried out, rushing to her side. "You'll mind your tongue when speaking to your betters." Blackwood snarled. "Thomas Hartley was a fool to marry white trash like you, and now we see your true colors, spreading your legs for the first savage that—" He never finished the sentence. The store door burst open, and Jake, one of the drifters from her cabin, stumbled in. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "Indians," he gasped. "Coming this way. Dozen of them, maybe more. Armed." The store erupted in panic. Men ran for their weapons. Women gathered their children. But Emma noticed something odd. Jake kept glancing at her, his expression strange. Outside, shouts arose as the riders appeared on the horizon. Emma pushed through the crowd to look, her heart hammering. But these weren't Comanche warriors on a raid. They were reservation Indians, traveling under a white flag, their horses laden with trade goods. The tension in the town remained high as the peaceful trading party was met with suspicion and barely concealed hostility. Emma watched it all with new eyes, seeing the fear that drove the hatred, the ignorance that bred violence. That night, back in her damaged cabin, she tucked Samuel into bed with extra care. The boy was full of questions she couldn't answer. "Why did Mr. Blackwood hit you, Mama?" "Because he's afraid," she said honestly. "Some people hit when they're afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of things they don't understand, of people who are different. Like Grey Wolf." "Yes, sweetheart, like Grey Wolf." Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm not afraid of Grey Wolf. He's good." "Yes," Emma agreed. touching the medicine pouch hidden beneath her dress. "He is—" The harassment began in earnest the next day. She woke to find "Indian Lover" painted across her door in red paint that looked disturbingly like blood. Her chickens had been let out of their coop during the night, and 2 were missing. The small garden she'd managed to protect through the winter had been trampled. But worse than the property damage were the social consequences. The few women who had still acknowledged her now crossed the street to avoid her. The minister paid a visit, speaking of the dangers to her immortal soul, and suggesting she consider leaving the area for the boy's sake. At the general store, Mrs. Morrison refused to extend credit, despite Emma's years of good payment when Thomas was alive. "I can't risk my reputation," the woman said primly. "Association with certain elements." Emma paid for what little she could afford with her dwindling cash and left with her head high. But inside, desperation gnawed at her. Without credit, without the ability to trade eggs and preserves for supplies, they would starve before spring. It was Blackwood who made the next move. He appeared at her cabin one evening, accompanied by 2 of his ranch hands. Emma saw them coming and loaded Thomas's rifle, but she knew it was mostly for show. 3 men could easily overpower her. "Mrs. Hartley," Blackwood called from the yard, not approaching the door. "I've come with a proposition. State your business from there," Emma called back. "Now, is that any way to treat a neighbor?" His voice carried false hurt. "I'm here to help. You're in a hard spot. Anyone can see that. No man to protect you, no money for supplies. And now this unfortunate reputation. Get to the point, Mr. Blackwood. Marry me." The words dropped like stones. "I'll pay your debts, fix your cabin, provide for the boy. You'll have respectability again. Protection. All this unpleasantness will be forgotten." Emma's hands tightened on the rifle. "And if I refuse? Well," Blackwood's voice hardened. "A woman with your reputation, living alone, drawing Indians to the area. The town might decide you're a danger. Child might be better off with a proper family. Courts tend to agree with upstanding citizens over fallen women." The threat was clear. Marry him or lose Samuel. Emma felt the walls closing in. The trap perfectly sprung. This was how it worked on the frontier. Women had no power without men, no rights that couldn't be stripped away by those with influence and money. "I need time to consider," she managed. 3 days, Blackwood said generously. "After that, I'll have to think about the boy's welfare." After they left, Emma sank into a chair, shaking. Samuel emerged from the bedroom where she'd hidden him. "Are you going to marry that mean man, Mama?" "I don't know," she admitted, pulling him close. "I don't know what to do." That night, she held the medicine pouch Grey Wolf had given her, running her fingers over the soft leather. Protection. He'd said, strength. But how could herbs and stones protect her from the violence of her own people? How could a hawk feather give her strength against the law itself? She thought of Grey Wolf, somewhere in the vast wilderness, free but alone. She thought of the kindness in his dark eyes, the gentleness of his hands as he tended Samuel, the respect he'd shown her even in her most desperate moment. The contrast with Blackwood's casual cruelty was stark. 2 days passed in agony. Emma made what preparations she could, hiding what few valuables remained, teaching Samuel what to do if she was taken away. The boy was too young to understand fully, but he sensed the danger. He'd taken to carrying the wooden horse Grey Wolf had carved everywhere, clutching it like a talisman. On the evening of the 2nd day, as Emma sat by the fire trying to find a solution that didn't exist, Samuel suddenly perked up. "Mama," he whispered. "Someone's outside." Emma grabbed the rifle, her heart pounding. Had Blackwood decided not to wait, but Samuel wasn't frightened. Instead, he ran to the window, peering out into the darkness. "It's him," the boy breathed. "It's Grey Wolf." Emma's heart leaped, then sank. If Grey Wolf was seen here, it would confirm every ugly rumor, seal her fate completely, but she couldn't turn away the man who had saved them. She opened the door cautiously. He stood at the edge of the firelight, nearly invisible in the darkness. but she could see the concern in his eyes, the tension in his stance. "I heard," he said simply. "In the trading post. What they say. What they plan." "You shouldn't be here," Emma said, even as every fiber of her being was glad he was. "If they see you, they watch the front." Grey Wolf said, "I came from the creek. We must talk." She let him in, knowing she was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Samuel flew to him, wrapping his arms around Grey Wolf's legs with pure joy. The warrior's face softened as he greeted the boy, but his eyes remained troubled as they met Emma's. "Tell me," he said. So she did. All of it. The harassment, the threats, Blackwood's ultimatum. Grey Wolf listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "This man," he finally said, "he uses your laws against you, your people's fears. There is no honor in this." "Honor doesn't matter here," Emma said bitterly. "Power matters. Money matters. I have neither. You have something else." Grey Wolf said, "You have truth, and you have me." The last words were spoken quietly, but they rang in the small cabin like a bell. Emma stared at him, afraid to hope. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Grey Wolf replied, meeting her eyes steadily, "that you owe me nothing, but I owe you everything. You trusted me when fear would have been easier. Your son looks at me and sees a man, not a savage. This is a gift beyond measure." He stood, his decision made. "Pack what you need. We leave before dawn." "Leave?" Emma's head spun. "But where? How?" "West," he said. "There are places where a mixed family can live. Not easily, but possibly better than this." Mixed family. The word should have shocked her, but instead they felt right, natural, as if all along, from that moment in the storm, they had been moving toward this. "They'll come after us," she warned. "Blackwood won't let the insult stand." "Let them come," Grey Wolf said, and for the first time she saw the warrior he truly was, dangerous when those he protected were threatened. "I have faced worse than a greedy rancher and his hired guns." Samuel had been listening with growing excitement. "We're going with Grey Wolf, really?" Emma looked at her son's shining face, at the man who had saved them asking nothing in return, at the cabin that had become a prison. The choice, when stripped of fear and propriety, was simple. "Yes," she said, "we're going with Grey Wolf." The medicine pouch seemed to pulse warm against her chest, and Emma finally understood. Protection didn't always mean walls and weapons. Sometimes it meant the courage to walk away, to choose an uncertain future over a certain cage. Sometimes it meant choosing love, unexpected, impossible, transformative love, over the cold safety of surrender. The news came like a thunderclap 2 days after Emma's disappearance. A cavalry patrol had been attacked at Willow Pass, 15 miles west of town. 3 soldiers wounded, supplies stolen. The Comanche warrior Grey Wolf was identified as the leader of the attackers, though witnesses disagreed on whether he acted alone or with others. Captain Marcus Bradley of the 7th Cavalry stood in Blackwood's study, his uniform crisp despite the hard ride from Fort Laramie. "The Army takes attacks on its patrols very seriously, Mr. Blackwood. This Grey Wolf will be found and dealt with. He's got the Hartley woman and her boy," Blackwood said, pouring whiskey for himself but pointedly not offering any to the captain. "Kidnap them, no doubt. The poor woman must be suffering terribly." Captain Bradley, a man who had served on the frontier for 10 years, kept his expression neutral. He'd heard different versions of this story at the trading post. "When did Mrs. Hartley disappear?" 3 nights ago. I'd offered her protection, marriage even, despite her compromised reputation. She must have refused out of fear of that savage. "I see." Bradley's tone was carefully noncommittal. "We'll need to search her property for clues to their direction." What they found at the cabin puzzled the captain. No signs of struggle. Clothes and personal items carefully selected and removed. The hidden root cellar empty of preserves, suggesting planned departure rather than violent abduction. Most telling was what they found tucked behind a loose board, a letter in Emma's neat handwriting. "To whoever finds this," Bradley read aloud to his sergeant while Blackwood fumed nearby. "I leave of my own free will. My son and I are not kidnapped or coerced. We go to find a life where we can live without harassment or threat. Do not follow us. E. Hartley." "Lies," Blackwood snarled. "The savage made her write it." Bradley folded the letter carefully. "Perhaps, but it complicates matters. A willing departure is not a crime, even if her choice of companion is unusual. She's consorting with an enemy of the United States." Blackwood's face was red with fury. "That makes her a traitor." "That's for the law to decide, not us." Bradley turned to his sergeant. "We'll track them, determine the truth of the matter. If she's a hostage, we'll retrieve her. If not—" He shrugged. The trail was 3 days old, but Grey Wolf had made little effort to hide it initially. Bradley, who had fought and tracked Comanche for years, found this curious. It was as if the warrior wanted to be followed to a certain point. Then the trail became much harder to follow, splitting and doubling back, using every trick of concealment. They found the first camp 5 miles from the cabin. Signs showed 3 people had slept there, a man, a woman, and a child. No indications of restraint or struggle. The woman's tracks showed her walking freely, even helping to break camp. "Sir," Sergeant O'Brien called from near the creek. "Found something." It was a child's drawing, scratched in the dirt and preserved by an overhanging rock. Crude figures of 3 people holding hands, a small one in the middle, flanked by 2 taller ones. Above them, a son with a smiling face. "Doesn't look like a scared child," O'Brien observed. Bradley said nothing, but his doubts about the kidnapping grew. He'd seen too many frontier tragedies to ignore evidence. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't the simple savage raids homestead story Blackwood was selling. They tracked for 2 more days, the trail growing colder and more difficult. Grey Wolf was heading into rough country, areas the army rarely patrolled. Then they found the site of the attack on the supply patrol, or what the patrol claimed was an attack. Bradley examined the scene carefully. The wagon tracks, the positions where men had taken cover, the scattered supplies. Something bothered him. He'd been in dozens of Comanche attacks, and this didn't fit the pattern. "Sergeant," he said finally, "what strikes you as odd here?" O'Brien, a veteran himself, looked around. "No arrows." "Sir, Comanche always use arrows first. Save ammunition, and the supplies, only food and medicine taken. They left the ammunition, the weapons, and the wounds on our men. Clean shots, meant to disable, not kill, almost like someone who didn't want to kill soldiers. Just stop them." Bradley's expression was grim. "Get me Private Morrison. He was on that patrol, wasn't he?" Morrison, barely 18 and nervous under his captain's scrutiny, eventually broke under questioning. The patrol hadn't been attacked while moving. They'd been in camp, drunk on contraband whiskey. When the Comanche appeared, they'd fired first, against standing orders about engaging peaceful Indians. The warrior had defended himself, wounding 3 men with precise shots, then taken only what supplies he needed. "He could have killed us all," Morrison admitted. We were too drunk to fight properly, but he just took the supplies and left, said something in English about feeding his family." Bradley dismissed the shaken private and turned to O'Brien. "This changes things." Meanwhile, 50 miles west, Emma, Samuel, and Grey Wolf had found temporary shelter in a hidden valley Grey Wolf knew from his youth. A small stream ran through it, and game was plentiful. They'd set up camp in a protected grove. Using a combination of canvas from the cabin and traditional materials, Grey Wolf gathered to create a comfortable shelter. The past days had been a revelation for Emma. Away from the condemning eyes of town, she found herself truly seeing Grey Wolf for the first time. Not as a Comanche warrior or a threat to her world, but as a man, complex, caring, and unexpectedly gentle. He taught Samuel to fish in the stream, showing infinite patience as the boy tangled lines and scared away fish with his enthusiasm. In the evenings, he told stories of his people, their history and traditions, painted pictures with words of a time when buffalo covered the plains like a brown sea. "My grandfather saw the first white traders," he said one night, the campfire casting dancing shadows on his face. He thought they were ghosts, pale and strange, but he traded with them, learned some of their language. He said to us, "These new people are not going away. We must learn to live with them or perish." "What happened to him?" Emma asked softly. "Died fighting soldiers who attacked our winter camp. He was 70 winters old, still trying to protect the children." Grey Wolf's voice held old pain. He was right, though. Those who didn't learn to live with change are gone now. Emma thought of her own grandfather, who had come west seeking fortune and freedom. The parallels were not lost on her. Both peoples seeking to survive, to protect their families. Caught in a tragedy neither had fully chosen. Samuel had taken to the nomadic life with the adaptability of childhood. He helped gather firewood, learned to identify edible plants, and absorbed Grey Wolf's teachings like a sponge. Watching them together, Emma's heart ached with a mixture of joy and sorrow. This was what her son needed: guidance, teaching, a father's presence. That it came from a man her world deemed an enemy seemed less important with each passing day. On the 4th night in the valley, as Samuel slept soundly in the shelter, Emma found herself sitting beside Grey Wolf by the dying fire. They'd fallen into comfortable silence, but she could sense tension in him. "They're getting closer," he said finally. "The army?" "Yes. Tomorrow, maybe the day after." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "You can still go back. Tell them I forced you. They'll believe it." "Is that what you want?" Emma asked, her heart pounding. "No," he admitted. "But what I want and what is best for you." "Don't," Emma's voice was firm. "Don't make my choices for me. I've had enough of men deciding what's best for me." Grey Wolf was quiet for a moment. "You're right. I apologize. I chose this," Emma continued. "I chose to leave with you. Not because I had no options, but because—" She paused, searching for words. "Because for the first time since Thomas died, I feel alive, free, even with the danger, even with the uncertainty." "The danger is real," Grey Wolf warned. "My people won't fully accept you. Your people already reject you. We'll always be between worlds. Then we'll make our own world," Emma said with sudden, fierce determination. "A place where Samuel can grow up seeing people as people, not as enemies. Where kindness matters more than color." Grey Wolf reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His fingers were calloused but gentle. "You humble me," he said. "Your courage, your hope. I've been alone so long. I'd forgotten such things existed." "You saved us," Emma said. "In more ways than one. And you saved me," he replied. "From becoming the savage they said I was, from losing faith in the possibility of understanding between peoples." They sat in silence, hands linked, as the stars wheeled overhead. Emma thought of all the warnings she'd heard about Comanche warriors, all the tales of violence and savagery. Yet here was a man who had shown more honor and restraint than the civilized men of her own culture. The next morning brought a new urgency. Grey Wolf's tracking skills told him the army patrol was less than a day behind and closing. They broke camp quickly, but as they prepared to leave, Samuel fell ill. The boy woke fevered and weak, unable to keep food down. "It's the water," Grey Wolf diagnosed after checking the boy. "Different streams carry different sickness. He needs rest and medicine." But rest meant capture. Emma felt torn between her son's immediate needs and the longer-term danger. Grey Wolf made the decision for them. "We make a stand here," he said. "I know this valley. There are defensive positions. If they come as enemies, I can hold them off. If they come to talk—" He shrugged. They moved to a more defensible position, a cluster of rocks with clear sight lines and multiple escape routes. Grey Wolf prepared for siege, but also for negotiation. He placed a white cloth where it could be easily displayed, prepared weapons but kept them concealed. Emma tended Samuel with herbs Grey Wolf provided, the same medicines he'd used during the blizzard. The boy's fever began to break, but he remained weak. She held him close, singing the lullabies her mother had sung, trying to keep fear from her voice. It was late afternoon when the cavalry appeared at the valley's entrance. Emma counted a dozen men, Captain Bradley at their head. They stopped well out of rifle range, assessing the situation. Grey Wolf stood slowly, making himself visible but keeping his hands away from weapons. "Captain Bradley," he called. "I know you. You fought my cousin at Antelope Creek." Bradley urged his horse a few steps forward. "Grey Wolf, you're wanted for attacking an army patrol. They attacked first." Grey Wolf replied calmly. "I defended. Took only food and medicine for woman and child. Left your men alive when I could have killed them all." "So you say. So your Private Morrison says, if you ask him with honest ears." Emma saw Bradley's expression flicker. He had asked, then, and learned the truth. "Mrs. Hartley," Bradley called. "Are you well? Is your son safe?" Emma stood, leaving Samuel in the shelter. She walked to stand beside Grey Wolf, her decision clear. "We're well, Captain. We're here by choice. Mr. Blackwood says otherwise. Says you were kidnapped." "Mr. Blackwood says many things," Emma replied, her voice carrying clearly. "Most of them serve his own interests. I left a letter explaining my departure. I assume you found it?" "We did. Then you know the truth. We harm no one. We ask only to be left in peace." Bradley studied them for a long moment. Emma saw him weighing duty against justice, orders against truth. Finally, he spoke, his words careful. "Grey Wolf, you'll need to answer for the supply raid, but—" He paused. "The patrol was drunk on duty, in violation of regulations. They fired first, against standing orders. Given the circumstances, and the minimal harm done, I'm willing to recommend leniency if you come peacefully." "And Emma?" Grey Wolf asked. "Mrs. Hartley is a free woman. Her choices are her own, though I'd counsel her to think carefully about her son's future." It was more than they could have hoped for, but Emma saw the trap in it. If Grey Wolf went with them, even peacefully, there was no guarantee of justice, frontier justice for an Indian who'd wounded soldiers, regardless of circumstances, often meant a rope. "I need your word," Grey Wolf said, echoing her thoughts. "Your word as a soldier that I'll receive fair treatment." Bradley hesitated, and in that hesitation, Emma read the truth. He couldn't make that promise. The pressure from men like Blackwood, the anger of the wounded soldiers, the politics of frontier authority, all would work against Grey Wolf. "I thought so," Grey Wolf said quietly. "Then I must decline. I can't let you go," Bradley said, real regret in his voice. "You know that, and I can't let you take him," Emma said, stepping forward. "You know the truth. Captain, you're a fair man, I can see that. But fairness isn't what waits in town. It's a lynch mob stirred up by Blackwood's lies. Mrs. Hartley, I'll make you a different offer." Emma interrupted. "Let us go. Report that you tracked us to the territorial border and lost us there. No one need know different. You're asking me to lie to my superiors, to violate my oath. I'm asking you to serve justice when the law can't," Emma said passionately. "To recognize that sometimes what's legal and what's right aren't the same thing." The silence stretched taut. Behind Bradley, his men shifted restlessly. Some clearly favored attack, others seemed uncomfortable with the situation. O'Brien, the sergeant, spoke quietly to Bradley, words Emma couldn't hear but which seemed to carry weight. Finally, Bradley made his decision. "Sergeant O'Brien." "Sir?" "Take the men and scout the North Valley. I'll conclude negotiations here." O'Brien's face was carefully neutral. "Yes, sir." "How long should we scout, sir?" "An hour should be sufficient." The message was clear. O'Brien saluted and led the patrol away, leaving Bradley alone. When they were out of sight, the captain dismounted and walked forward slowly, hands visible. "You have 1 hour," he said when he was close enough to speak quietly. "After that, Duty requires me to pursue. Head south, not west. Blackwood has men watching the western passes. Why? Grey Wolf asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Bradley was quiet for a moment. Because I've served on this frontier for 10 years. I've seen too much hate, too much blood, too much waste. If one Comanche warrior and one white woman can find peace together, maybe there's hope for the rest of us. He turned to Emma. Your son, is he truly well? I have medical supplies. He'll recover. Emma assured him. Thank you for asking. Bradley nodded, then looked back at Grey Wolf. For what it's worth, I believe your version of events. But belief and proof are different things in a military court. Go far, go fast, and don't come back to this territory. Captain, Grey Wolf said formally, you are a man of honor. I'm a tired soldier trying to do right in a world that makes it damn difficult. Bradley corrected. 1 hour. Captain Bradley kept his word for exactly 1 hour. But by then Grey Wolf had led them through terrain that would challenge even experienced trackers. They traveled south as advised, then cut east through a narrow canyon Emma wouldn't have spotted without Grey Wolf's guidance. Samuel, still weak but improving, rode on Grey Wolf's back, his small arms wrapped trustingly around the warrior's neck. They traveled through the night, stopping only when Emma stumbled with exhaustion. Grey Wolf found them shelter in a grove of cottonwoods near a small spring, where they rested until dawn. But their reprieve was short-lived. As the sun climbed higher, Grey Wolf's expression grew increasingly grim. Riders, he said quietly. Not army, moving fast from the west. Blackwood's men. Emma's heart sank. The rancher wouldn't give up easily. His pride and reputation were at stake. These wouldn't be soldiers bound by regulations and some sense of honor. These would be hired guns with only one purpose. How many? Emma asked, checking Thomas's rifle. 8, maybe 10. Grey Wolf was already packing their few belongings. Too many to fight in open ground with a sick child. They pushed on, but Samuel's condition limited their pace. The boy tried to be brave, but Emma could see the fever returning. The glassy look in his eyes. They needed shelter, medicine, and rest, none of which they could afford. By midday, the pursuit had closed to within 2 miles. Grey Wolf led them into rougher country, hoping to lose the riders in the broken landscape of ravines and mesas. But Blackwood had hired well. At least one of the trackers knew his business. There, Grey Wolf pointed to a cluster of rocks forming a natural fortress. We make our stand. It wasn't ideal, but it was defensible. A narrow approach, good cover, and a spring trickling from the rocks. They could hold out for a time. But Emma knew the mathematics of siege. 10 men could keep them pinned until thirst, hunger, or Samuel's worsening condition forced surrender. Grey Wolf positioned Emma and Samuel in the most protected spot, then set about preparing their defense. He had his rifle, tomahawk, and knife, plus Emma's rifle. Against 10 men, it seemed pitifully inadequate. When they come, he told Emma, you keep down. No matter what happens, protect the boy. We fight together, Emma insisted. Grey Wolf touched her face gently, a gesture that would have shocked her weeks ago but now seemed natural. You are brave, Emma Hartley, but the boy needs his mother alive. The riders appeared an hour later, spreading out in a half-circle beyond rifle range. Emma recognized Jake and Billy, the drifters from her cabin, among them, but the leader was someone she'd hoped never to see again, Luther Kane, Blackwood's foreman and enforcer, a man with a reputation for violence that made even hardened frontier folk nervous. Grey Wolf, Kane called out. We know you're in there. Send out the woman and boy. This ain't their fight. Everything all right is their fight. Grey Wolf replied. They are under my protection. Kane laughed, an ugly sound. Your protection? You're outnumbered 10 to 1. Savage. But mister, Blackwood's a generous man. Send them out unharmed, and we'll let you go. You can run back to whatever hole you crawled from. Emma knew it was a lie. They'd kill Grey Wolf the moment she and Samuel emerged. She'd seen Kane's handiwork before. A homesteader who'd refused to sell to Blackwood had been found beaten to death, officially killed by persons unknown. Counteroffer, Grey Wolf called back. You leave now. Tell Blackwood the trail went cold. Everyone lives. The response was a rifle shot that chipped rock inches from Grey Wolf's position. The message was clear. Negotiation was over. What followed was a deadly game of patience and marksmanship. Blackwood's men had numbers but had to cross open ground. Grey Wolf had position and skill. The first man to try rushing their position fell with a bullet in his shoulder. The second took a round through his thigh. Both shots were deliberately non-fatal. Grey Wolf still trying to avoid killing even when his own life was at stake. But Emma could see the inevitable outcome. More men were arriving. She counted at least 12 now. They were spreading out, looking for other approaches. Soon they'd find a way to flank the position. It was then that Samuel, delirious with fever, began to cry out. "Papa, Papa, where are you?" Emma's heart broke. She tried to comfort him, but he pushed her away. Reaching for something only he could see, Papa says the soldiers are coming. Good soldiers." Grey Wolf glanced back at them, and in that moment of distraction, a bullet creased his arm. Blood soaked through his shirt, but he didn't make a sound, just shifted position and returned fire. "How bad?" Emma asked. "I've had worse," he said, but she could see the pain in his eyes. The siege continued as the sun reached its zenith. Emma gave Samuel the last of their water, trying to cool his burning skin. The boy's cries had subsided to weak whimpers that were somehow worse than his earlier shouts. Then, impossibly, Emma heard it, a bugle call echoing off the canyon walls. Grey Wolf heard it too, his expression shifting from grim determination to wary hope. "Cavalry," he said. "But whose side?" The answer came quickly. Captain Bradley's voice boomed across the battlefield. "This is Captain Marcus Bradley of the 7th Cavalry. All armed civilians will lay down their weapons immediately. This is military jurisdiction." Kane's response was predictably profane, but his men were caught between the fortress of rocks and an approaching cavalry unit. The smart ones began to ease back. The stupid ones prepared to fight. "Mr. Kane," Bradley's voice carried clear authority. "I have warrants for Jake Morrison and Billy Thompson, wanted for theft and assault in Colorado territory. Any man interfering with their arrest will be charged with obstruction of military justice." Emma peered out to see Bradley leading a full patrol of 20 men. The captain had positioned them perfectly, cutting off any retreat. Kane's men milled in confusion, suddenly transformed from hunters to hunted. The standoff broke when Jake Morrison made a run for it. A cavalryman roped him like a calf, dragging him from his horse. Billy Thompson, seeing his partner captured, threw down his weapons and raised his hands. "Smart choice," Bradley called. Then, louder, "Mr. Kane, you and your remaining men have 2 minutes to disperse. After that, I'll consider you hostile insurgents threatening the peace of the territory." Kane knew when he was beaten. With a last hate-filled look toward the rocks, he wheeled his horse and rode off, his remaining men following. Only the captured outlaws remained, now in military custody. Bradley rode forward slowly, hands visible. "Grey Wolf, Mrs. Hartley, the immediate threat has passed. May I approach?" Grey Wolf emerged cautiously, rifle lowered but ready. Emma saw Bradley's eyes take in the warrior's wounded arm, her disheveled state, and most importantly, the sick child. "Your son needs medical attention," Bradley said without preamble. "I have a field medic with my unit." "Why?" Grey Wolf asked bluntly. "Why return? Why help us?" Bradley dismounted, his expression thoughtful. "Because after we parted, I received an interesting telegram from Fort Laramie. It seems a certain Howard Blackwood has been under investigation for land fraud and intimidation. The territorial governor is very interested in his activities. When my scouts reported his men moving in force, he shrugged. It seemed prudent to investigate." The field medic, a young corporal named Stevens, immediately took charge of Samuel. Emma hovered anxiously as he examined the boy, but his competent manner reassured her. "Fever from bad water, exhaustion, exposure," Stevens diagnosed, "but nothing that rest and proper medicine won't cure. I can give him something to bring the fever down now." While the medic worked, Bradley drew Grey Wolf and Emma aside. You can't stay in this territory. Blackwood's reach is long, and while he's being investigated, he's not arrested, yet. We know, Emma said. We're heading south, maybe to Mexico. New Mexico territory might be better, Bradley suggested. There are communities there, mixed settlements where unusual families find acceptance. I can give you names. Places where former soldiers have settled with Mexican wives, where the lines aren't drawn so sharp. Grey Wolf studied the captain with new interest. You know much about such places. My sergeant, O'Brien, has a Mexican wife. Bradley admitted. The Army doesn't officially approve, but in the territories, he shrugged again. Things are different. He produced a map and marked several locations. Santa Rosa has a good mission school. The priest there, Father Miguel, judges people by their actions, not their blood. There's work for skilled hunters, and he looked at Emma. They always need teachers who can read and write. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. After so much hate and fear, this unexpected kindness overwhelmed her. Captain, I don't know how to thank you. Then don't, Bradley said gruffly. Just live well. Prove that peace between our peoples is possible. He turned to Grey Wolf. I'll need to report that I found you, pursued you to the territorial border, and lost you in Mexico. It would help if you weren't seen in the territory again. We will be ghosts. Grey Wolf promised. As the medic finished treating Samuel in Grey Wolf's arm, Bradley prepared his men to depart. He left them with medical supplies, ammunition, and, despite regulations, some Army rations. One more thing, he said, pulling Emma aside. I had my men search your cabin more thoroughly. Found this hidden in the root cellar. He handed her a small leather pouch. Inside was gold, not much, but enough to start fresh. Thomas's emergency fund. Hidden so well she'd never found it. Your husband was a prudent man, Bradley said. He'd want you to have it. Emma clutched the pouch, tears flowing freely now. Thank you. For everything. Bradley touched his hat brim. Ma'am, take care of that boy. And, he glanced at Grey Wolf, take care of each other. As the cavalry rode away with their prisoners, Grey Wolf and Emma stood together, Samuel sleeping peacefully for the first time in days thanks to the medicine. He's right, Emma said. We can't stay here, but New Mexico, a fresh start. Together? Grey Wolf asked, and for the first time, she heard uncertainty in his voice. Emma took his hand, careful of his wounded arm. Together, if you'll have us. Not because we owe each other anything, but because, she took a breath, because I can't imagine any other way now. Grey Wolf was quiet for a long moment, then pulled her close with his good arm. When I saw you in the storm, desperate and brave, offering everything for your child, I knew you were special, but I never dreamed. What? Emma asked softly. That you would choose me, not from desperation or need, but freely. A Comanche warrior with no people, no home. You have a people now, Emma said firmly. Small as it is, you have us. Samuel stirred in his sleep, murmuring contentedly. The sun was beginning to sink toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere to the south, New Mexico waited with its promise of a different life. We should move, Grey Wolf said practically. Use the remaining daylight. But neither of them moved immediately, standing instead in the shelter of the rocks that had protected them, holding on to this moment of peace. They had survived pursuit, prejudice, and violence. They had found unexpected allies and glimpses of hope. The road ahead would be hard. They were choosing a life on the margins, never fully accepted by either world. But they would face it together. A widow, a warrior, and a boy who saw no strangeness in calling them both family. As they finally gathered their belongings and prepared to travel, Emma touched the medicine pouch at her chest. Grey Wolf's first gift to her. Protection and strength, he had said. She understood now that the real medicine wasn't in the herbs and stones, but in the courage to see past fear to the human heart beneath. "Ready?" Grey Wolf asked. Samuel secure on his back, their few possessions packed. "Ready," Emma confirmed, shouldering her rifle and Thomas's gold. They walked south into the painted desert sunset, toward an uncertain but chosen future, leaving behind the ruins of old lives and old hatreds. In the vast landscape of the American frontier, they were just three small figures, but in their bond, forged by blizzard and battle, kindness and courage, they carried the seed of something new, something that might, in time, help heal the wounded land they traveled through. 6 months later, in the high country of New Mexico Territory, smoke rose from a chimney into the crystal-clear morning air. The cabin was modest but solid, built into a hillside with a clear view of the valley below. It was smaller than Emma's old home, but infinitely warmer, filled with the mingled influences of two cultures learning to become one. Emma stood at the window, watching Samuel play in the yard. The boy had grown inches since their flight from Nebraska. His face sun-bronzed and healthy, he was practicing with a small bow Grey Wolf had made him, his concentration intense as he aimed at a target of bundled grass. "Pull to your cheek," Grey Wolf instructed patiently. "Breathe out as you release." The arrow flew relatively straight, striking the edge of the target. Samuel whooped with joy, and Grey Wolf's rare smile appeared, transforming his usually serious face. "I did it. Mama, did you see?" "I saw, sweetheart," Emma called back, her heart full. These moments of simple peace still felt miraculous. After weeks of hard travel, they'd found this valley 20 miles from Santa Rosa, far enough from town to avoid casual scrutiny, but close enough to trade and, eventually, for Samuel to attend the mission school Father Miguel ran. The priest had been everything Captain Bradley promised, a practical man who judged by deeds, not origins. When they'd arrived, trail-worn and wary, he'd taken one look at Samuel clinging to both their hands and said simply, "A family is a family. God's love knows no borders." It hadn't all been easy. There'd been suspicion from some townspeople, curiosity from others, but Grey Wolf's hunting skills had quickly proved valuable, bringing in game to trade. While Emma's education allowed her to help Father Miguel with his records and correspondence, slowly, carefully, they'd built a place for themselves. "The Robertson family is coming for dinner," Emma reminded Grey Wolf as he and Samuel came inside. "Sarah's bringing her cornbread." The Robertsons were their nearest neighbors, a mixed family themselves. Jim Robertson, a former Buffalo soldier, and his Apache wife, Sarah. Their acceptance had meant everything in those early weeks, showing others that this new family was not so strange or threatening. Grey Wolf nodded, hanging his bow on the wall next to Thomas's rifle. The mixing of their lives showed in every corner, Comanche beadwork beside Emma's few saved books, traditional tools alongside frontier cookware, Samuel's drawings of horses and warriors decorating the walls. "Papa Grey Wolf," Samuel said, using the name he'd settled on after much thought. "Will you tell the story tonight? About how you saved us?" Grey Wolf ruffled the boy's hair. "Perhaps your mother should tell it. She remembers better. You both tell it different." Samuel said with the wisdom of 6 years, "I like hearing both ways." Emma smiled, stirring the stew on their small stove. The story had indeed become family legend, told and retold, each version adding layers of meaning. In Samuel's young mind, it was an adventure tale. For Emma and Grey Wolf, it was the story of how they'd found each other, how love had grown from kindness in the midst of a storm. As afternoon wore on, Emma worked on her correspondence. She'd been hired to help Father Miguel translate documents and write letters for townspeople who couldn't. It wasn't much money, but combined with Grey Wolf's hunting and the small garden they'd managed to establish, it was enough. She was finishing a letter when Grey Wolf touched her shoulder. "Someone comes." Emma tensed, even after months of peace. The habit of wariness died hard, but Grey Wolf was calm, just alert. One rider, moving slow. They went to the door together, Emma's hand near the rifle. Grey Wolf relaxed but ready. The rider who appeared was unexpected. Sergeant O'Brien, Captain Bradley's right hand. Mrs. Hart, excuse me, what name do you use now? O'Brien asked, dismounting stiffly. Just Emma, she said carefully. This is Grey Wolf. You remember Sergeant O'Brien? I remember, Grey Wolf said. You spoke for us to your captain. O'Brien nodded. I did, and I'm glad to see you're well. He reached into his saddlebags. I have news, and a letter. They invited him in, Samuel eyeing the soldier with curious rather than fearful eyes. O'Brien accepted coffee gratefully, clearly saddle-sore from long riding. First, the news, he said. Howard Blackwood is in federal prison. Land fraud, intimidation, conspiracy to commit murder. He won't trouble anyone for 20 years, if ever. Emma felt a weight she hadn't known she carried lift from her shoulders. And the town? Changing. Some of Blackwood's men faced charges too. Others drifted away. New families moving in, including some diverse ones. The frontier's changing. Ma'am, slowly, but changing. And Captain Bradley? Grey Wolf asked. Promoted to major, transferred to Washington to advise on Indian affairs. He wanted you to have this. O'Brien handed over a sealed letter. Emma opened it with trembling fingers. Bradley's neat script covered a single page. Mrs. Hartley and Grey Wolf, I trust this finds you well and at peace. O'Brien will have told you about Blackwood. What he may not have said is that your story has traveled farther than you might imagine. I've used it, with the names changed, in my reports arguing for more humane policies toward the tribes. There are those in Washington who begin to see that peace is possible, that the old ways of hate and war serve no one. Your courage in choosing each other despite all obstacles gives hope that our peoples need not be eternal enemies. I've taken the liberty of registering your homestead claim in New Mexico under Emma Hartley. Grey Wolf. There are papers making you a scout for the Army, discharged with honor. It's not much, but it provides some legal protection should you need it. Live well. Raise that boy to be the bridge between worlds that we old fighters could never be. With respect, Marcus Bradley, Major, U.S. Army. Emma wiped away tears. Grey Wolf's hand found hers, squeezing gently. There's more, O'Brien said. My Maria and I, we're settling near Las Cruces when my enlistment's up next year. Thought you should know there'll be another mixed family in the territory. Maybe our children can grow up together, not knowing they're supposed to be different. After O'Brien left, promising to visit again, the Robertson family arrived for dinner. The evening was filled with laughter and stories. Jim Robertson regaling them with tales from his Army days, while Sarah taught Emma a new way to prepare venison. Their children played together, Samuel and the Robertson twins, all three chattering in a mixture of English, Spanish, and Apache that would have horrified purists, but sounded like music to Emma's ears. As the evening wound down and their guests prepared to leave, Sarah pulled Emma aside. You're happy, she said. Not a question, but an observation. I am, Emma admitted. Happier than I ever thought possible after Thomas died. The heart finds its own trail, Sarah said wisely. Not always the one others map for us. Later, after Samuel was asleep, Emma and Grey Wolf sat by their fire as they had that first night in the cave. But now it was their hearth, in their home, built by their hands together. Do you ever miss it? Emma asked. The old life, the freedom of the plains? Grey Wolf considered. I miss my people, the buffalo, the way things were. He turned to her. But I would not trade this for those memories. This is real. This is now. No regrets. How can I regret the trail that brought me to you? To him? He nodded toward Samuel's room. My people have a saying, the eagle may soar alone, but the wolf thrives in family. Emma leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. Outside, coyotes called in the distance, and wind sang through the pines. Inside, they were safe, warm, together. Tell me about your grandmother again. Emma said, the healer. I want to learn more about the medicines. Grey Wolf smiled, beginning the familiar story. As he talked, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that desperate night in the blizzard to this peaceful evening, they'd traveled farther than miles could measure. They'd crossed the greatest distance of all, from fear to trust, from stranger to family, from alone to together. Samuel stirred in his sleep, murmuring something about arrows and horses. Tomorrow he would wake to two parents who loved him, in a home built on hope rather than hate. He would grow up seeing the world not in terms of us and them, but simply as people, each with their own story. The fire crackled softly, painting dancing shadows on the walls. Grey Wolf's voice rumbled on, telling of healing herbs and ancient wisdom. Emma closed her eyes, listening, learning, loving. They'd built more than a cabin in this valley. They'd built a life that proved the prophets of hate wrong. Love could bloom in the harshest ground. Understanding could bridge the widest gulfs. And sometimes, in the midst of life's fiercest storms, strangers could save each other in ways neither expected. The medicine pouch rested against Emma's heart, its promise fulfilled. Protection, strength, but most of all, the courage to see past surface differences to the common humanity beneath. In their small cabin in the New Mexico mountains, a new kind of family slept peacefully, proof that even in the harsh frontier, love could find a way. The West was still wild, but in this tiny corner of it, peace reigned. And from such small beginnings, who could say what might grow? Thank you all for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and let me know your thoughts about Emma and Grey Wolf's journey. What touched your heart the most? Share your reflections. And let's keep these powerful stories of love and courage alive together.